Hey, what's going on everyone, and welcome back to another Disney Lorcana card of the day. And today's card of the day is going to be a new card, or one we saw very recently. I'm actually recording this the day after we received it. We saw her revealed on Monday, and today is Tuesday, so I'm going ahead and review her today. And that card is, of course, Rapunzel letting down her hair. Rapunzel is a ruby card. She costs 6 ink, but she's not inkable, which again means she cannot be placed into your inkwell. She has 5 strength, 4 willpower, and she quests for 2 lore. She has 1 ability, and it's called Tangle. It reads, when you play this character, each opponent loses 1 lore. I should also mention that she is uncommon as far as her rarity goes, and that she is also a princess as far as her, classifications go. She has the type princess, so she can work with, say, Moana. So what do I think about Rapunzel? So, of course, a big glaring thing, of course, is the uninkable feature, but that doesn't necessarily make or break a card. If you see somebody with uninkable, that usually means that they have a really solid ability. Genie, for example, the only Genie we've seen so far, he's uninkable. He has a really awesome ability. Rafiki, we just got Rafiki recently. He is also uninkable, but he has Rush. Same with Beast as well, the new Emerald Beast. He also has Rush. All of these cards are uninkable, and I believe that means that they have a slightly higher power than the inkable cards, I suppose. You have something like Sven, the new Sven, or Archimedes, or Sergeant Tibbs, or someone who is inkable, and they're just there. They're cards, they do their thing. Rapunzel has a pretty solid effect, which would mean that she's not inkable. So you gotta think about, if I put her in my deck, I want to play her. The 6 cost isn't too bad. We only have one other card in Ruby that's not inkable, and I believe that's just Dragonfire. I believe Dragonfire is the only other Ruby card that we have that isn't inkable. And Dragonfire is probably going to be a Ruby, if not like a format staple. Yeah, you're going to want to include probably 4 copies of Dragonfire in your deck so you can remove really bothersome characters from your opponent's side of the field. So with that being said, you don't have a lot of other spaces open for uninkable cards. You really shouldn't run more than, say, 12 uninkable cards, because after 12, you might find it very difficult to actually ink cards every turn. You might be drawing these cards that cannot be inked, like Rapunzel's, like Dragonfire's, and if you don't have the cards in your inkwell to play these, well, they're stuck in your hand. You gotta ink something, right? So I understand how her uninkable trait is a little rough. She's not bad, especially when compared, with something like Ruby Aladdin. I can understand that her being uninkable is definitely a big turnoff, because you're like, oh, I can't play her yet, I need to put her in my inkwell. But she has a really potent ability. Is it as game-changing as, say, the Genie, where the Genie comes down and can basically turn an unwinnable position into at least a winnable position? Well, maybe, actually. It's not as powerful, but it is still pretty strong. It's not bad. It's also not fair to compare Rapunzel to Genie, because they're in 2 different colors. If I was running an Emerald and a Ruby deck where I had both of these in there, as of right now, I would probably run the Genie, because I do think the Genie is very impactful. But we still haven't seen the full set yet. We've seen almost half the cards, just about half the cards so far, and there could be some cards that work really well with Rapunzel, and I hope that's true, because I think she's a really good card. When she's played, having your opponent lose 1 lore can keep you in the game. It's very possible that your opponent can be at 18 lore and have an unexerted character on their side of the field that can quest for 2 lore. You can challenge and banish all of your opponent's other exerted characters. We'll say they have exerted characters, but if you can't deal with that unexerted character, then you lose the game. Rapunzel at least gives you a chance, at least buys you a turn, maybe to find an answer. Maybe you can find like an Aladdin, or maybe you can use her after the turn you play her to quest for 2 lore, and maybe that can help you win the game. Maybe you threaten victory after putting her down, combined with your other characters, and now your opponent cannot quest. Now your opponent has to challenge you, or they will lose the game on your next turn. And that's not an outrageous situation. That can definitely happen, and I have been in situations, and I have seen games as well, where your opponent, or my opponent, is sitting at 18 lore with an unexerted character, or a couple unexerted characters that can quest to get them enough lore. And that feels bad because you're like, I can't do anything about this. But at least with Rapunzel, you can. You just play her, your opponent loses a lore, that keeps you in the game. And again, if you have a good board state where you can threaten victory on your next turn, now your opponent has to deal with your board or they're going to lose the game. And I think that's like her strength right there, is to kind of keep you in the game like that. We have a couple other cards that do that as well. Of course, there's removal cards, Dragonfire, Let It Go, and of course the damage spells like Smash and Fire the Cannons. By removing your opponent's characters, well, now they can't quest for any lore, right? But we also have other characters like the Genie and like the Ruby Aladdin who can turn the game back in your favor. The Genie can just return one of your opponent's characters to their hand, so they can't quest with it. Ruby Aladdin can banish a character and then steal 2 lore from your opponent, and then you gain 2 lore. Because Rapunzel costs 6 ink, you could do the strategy of shifting an Aladdin into shifting a green Aladdin into the bigger Ruby Aladdin on, like, say your 5th turn, and then on your 6th turn you play Rapunzel. You're gonna shift that lore count. That would be a 5 lore shift, and how it works is your opponent loses 2 lore, you gain 2 lore, and then after playing Rapunzel, your opponent loses 1 other lore. So that's like a 4 lore shift. Now everything's all wonky, but you're up 3 lore and your opponent's down 2 lore. Pretty solid. That's pretty solid. That definitely keeps you in the game. Then again, her being able to quest for 2 lore after she's played is actually really solid. If she quested for only 1 lore, that's not looking good, right? I can see why you probably you wouldn't really want to play her unless you're able to reuse her come into play effect in some way, shape, or form. In addition, she does sport 5 strength. That's not bad. She is able to challenge into a lot of characters. Aladdin, Dreaming Guardian Aurora, she can take her out. There's of course Stitch, she can take him out. I'll say Aladdin as well. She can take out the Ruby Aladdin. There are many 5 willpower or less characters that Rapunzel can take out. Now her 4 willpower on herself as well, that's a little rough. I get that, you gotta try to maintain her balance. If she was like a 5-5, she'd be really strong. But a 5-4, she does not get banished to a lot of 3 strength characters though. So it still might take 2 hits to take her out. The 4 willpower also makes her immune to, say, a Smash from Steel. Your opponent's gonna have to either play 2 Fire the Cannons, or they're going to have to play Smash and then Fire the Cannons, or challenge her with like a Captain Hook and then play Fire the Cannons. Either way, that's a lot of resources to get rid of her. She definitely has an impact, and I really like that. When she's played, your opponent loses a lore, and then your next turn, you are able to quest with her or challenge with her. That's not bad. Those are all good traits, and those are very, very good. In addition, she is a princess, so she can be combined with Moana in Amber. So if you are playing like an Amber Ruby deck with a lot of princesses, well, now we have an extra princess. We do have Mulan in Ruby. She is also a princess. And now with Rapunzel, we have our 2nd Ruby princess. And that's not counting Ariel, Moana, and Minnie Mouse. I think those are the 3 for Amber. I don't think I'm missing anybody. And then now we also have Goofy, who's not a princess. He's not a princess, but he is a bodyguard character who can protect your princess characters. And he has, he comes out for 5 resources, which is going to fit the curve very well. And if you want to go a little bigger, we do have a new Stitch card, which I'll also talk about probably in another video, where he can help you draw some cards, and he's a solid quester as well. So it's looking pretty good. She's a solid card. She's not bad. I don't think she's bad at all. She definitely has her uses. She can definitely keep you in the game and maybe switch the pace of the game to your side or in your favor. So now your opponent has to be like, oh man, I can't win on my turn. I need to deal with my opponent's board. Having your opponent lose one lore is never a bad thing. Her being uninkable is a little rough, but she might not necessarily be a 4 of in a deck. She might only be like a 2 of. She has a very good ability, and as of right now, you might not want to play it like every single game, but when you do have her and you do play her, it's not bad. It's a win for you. I don't see any draw side for you, being able to play her every so often. Your opponent loses a lore. You have a character on the field who can either challenge very well or quest for 2 lore. Right now, I'm actually going to give her a solid 7, easy 7. When I saw her, I was like, this card's really good, right? Looked into her a bit. If there is some recursion, if you're able to maybe to bounce your characters a bit more, maybe like something can happen twice when a character comes into play, whatever the reason, I would bump her up to maybe like an 8 or so. But having your opponent lose lore, which is how they win the game, is never a bad thing. I think she's a solid card. Again, maybe not a 4 of, but definitely I would consider at least a 2 of in most decks. But yeah, that's how I feel about her. I think she's solid, right? Solid 7 out of 10. Not a bad card. Not a bad card. So, but hey, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. You stay safe out there. Make good decisions. And I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye.